Welcome back into the League Winners Fantasy Podcast. It's me, Dalton, your host again. As you can see, AJ is not here. He's currently out of town. He will be back soon. So we have Webb instead. Webb, say hello.
Hello.
He's our local, apparently Dolphins expert. Didn't know that until today.
Yes.
We can jump into a little bit of news before we start the show today. Out of Tampa Bay, Buccaneers little camp news. Leonard Fournette, running back for the Buccaneers, coming off a big leader last year. Some people had high expectations this year. He reports to camp weighing 260 pounds. That is about 40 pounds up from his playing weight of 220 last year. Currently not a concern. If he goes into preseason with this weight, something to keep an eye on.
His coaches did tell him that he needs to lose weight, so they've addressed it.
They've addressed it. Also out of the Bucs, Kyle Rudolph, former tight end of the Vikings and Giants, have been signed. He won't really have a fantasy impact. He'll take a little bit of work away from Cameron Brate. This also makes it seem a little more likely that Rob Gronkowski will stay retired. Very unfortunate for the Bucs, but for fantasy, not really relevant. Down in New York, or I guess up in New York, the Giants, Daniel Bellinger, their rookie tight end, he's been designated the PUP, physically unable to perform list. Currently, that's not a concern as it's just training camp, and you can definitely get off it before the regular season starts. Just something to keep an eye on as we approach the preseason. In Arizona, Kyler Murray secures a 5-year extension. Cardinals commit to him as their quarterback of the future. He was the second highest paid quarterback in the NFL now on a per year basis behind Aaron Rodgers. Nothing really changes fantasy value there, just interesting statistic there. The Browns signed quarterback Josh Rosen. Rumors coming out of Cleveland that Deshaun Watson might receive an 8-game suspension. This signing makes it seem more likely that the Browns are expecting something a little bit more lengthy than the 6 weeks. So should Watson be suspended, we have to keep an eye on the quarterback battle between Jacoby Brissett and Josh Rosen. And one final thing, J.K. Dobbins coming off the ACL and MCL tears last season. That's always a terrible injury, but he seems to think he's good to go for the start of the regular season. And as Coach Jim Harbaugh is starting to look, John Harbaugh, my apologies, not his brother Jim. John Harbaugh is starting to look more optimistic that he will be ready to go, which is a great sign, as he is always a great option in fantasy. I'm a big fan. That concludes our news. So today we have an AFC East show for you. Kicking off the AFC East with the Jets. Last place to start, just because why not? We'll start with the quarterback, Zach Wilson. He's been in the news lately for non-football reasons, but strictly on-the-field play, I'm not a fan of him. Second-year quarterbacks, someone's going to take a leap. One of these second-year quarterbacks are going to take a leap. I just don't think it's going to be Zach Wilson.
Right. So the Jets have some new talent this season, which I think could make them be playoff contenders. I don't think they will go far in the playoffs, but I think they can contend. Their defense is very good right now, and they have some new wide receivers that can do some good for the offense.
Drafted Garrett Wilson out of Ohio State in the first round of this year's draft, and Breece Hall, the running back from Iowa State, in the second round. Both of these showing that they have support for Zach Wilson despite a rocky rookie campaign. So by surrounding him with these weapons, they expect him to improve, and I think he'll improve as well, but just not to a fantasy relevant status of where you're drafting in your drafts. I have him as a QB 28, which means I'm not touching him in a 12-team league, and I'm sure Webb isn't either. Looking at their running back play, like we said, the rookie from Iowa State, Breece Hall, big fan of him this year, actually, above consensus. Currently being drafted in the 6th round as the RB31. I have him as the RB20, which is an 11-spot lead. I think he could play very well, and I think he'll take control of the backfield. Michael Carter would be his competition. He's a second-year running back. High expectations last year. This year, because of the pick to Breece Hall, people were a little bit lower on Michael Carter. RB37 for me. Late round flyer. If Breece Hall gets hurt, he'll be their only option really. But as long as Breece Hall's healthy, Michael Carter's not really a viable play. Now about those wide receivers, you were talking about the new receivers. Garrett Wilson from Ohio State was drafted. This clouds up the receiver room a little bit because they have Elijah Moore, another second-year player who broke out a little bit last year, but not with Zach Wilson. Him and Zach Wilson didn't really have that chemistry. It was when Zach Wilson went down with an injury and they brought in the backups is when Elijah Moore really started to thrive. I think he can carry that over from the end of the season into this year. I have Elijah Moore as my wide receiver 28, a little bit above his consensus of wide receiver 32. And Garrett Wilson is the rookie, the high draft capital on him. I don't think this year's the year for him just because I don't trust Zach Wilson and I don't think he can support two receivers. I have him at RB43, which is way higher than consensus, but that's like his ceiling. He's not going to have a breakout year this year. There's not really a good situation. I want to get your input on little Elijah Moore here. He's currently being drafted in the 7th round. I want to see who you would rather have here in the 7th round. If you're sitting in the 7th round and you're looking at either Elijah Moore or Marquise Brown of the Arizona Cardinals. He got traded from the Ravens this year. I'm a big fan. I think I would rather have Elijah Moore, but I just wanted to toss this one out here for you.
Yeah, Elijah Moore is a very popular player as far as his showboating and stuff. So he gets a little of attention. I always like that. So I think I guess popularity-wise, Elijah Moore is definitely the way to go, and he definitely has talent too.
I agree 100%. Another player getting drafted right around him is Jerry Jeudy, and that's a little trickier one because Jerry Jeudy has the new quarterback coming over in Russell Wilson down in Denver, and I think it's a little bit interesting if you're sitting there looking at Elijah Moore or Jerry Jeudy. Personally, I have Elijah Moore as my wide receiver 28, whereas I have Jerry Jeudy as my wide receiver 30. So I would take Elijah Moore, but that's one of those things. Like a lot of these players where you're sitting right there and you're looking at two guys who are ranked pretty closely, it's up to personal preference. If you think Elijah Moore will be able to play well with Zach Wilson, you're obviously taking him. But if you think Jerry Jeudy is going to be the guy for Russell Wilson, that's the way to go. So it's a lot of this stuff is personal preference from just like one or two spots.
Right. I think Jerry Jeudy has more
upside.
I think he has more experience, like
he does.
Productive experience.
Yep, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
I think experience is always a plus for him.
It is, and especially since he has a better quarterback play in this situation, that's a good one of those spots where you can't really go wrong with either option.
Right.
If you look at the tight ends, don't. Just being honest out here, you have C.J. Uzman and Tyler Conklin. Tyler Conklin was just drafted. C.J. Uzman was brought over from the Bengals. Looks like Tyler Conklin's going to win the job, at least early in camps. Obviously, there's still a long way before the season, but even if he does, it's not going to be a Travis Kelce situation. Neither of these guys are worth a pick on in fantasy. If we move on down to Buffalo, New York here with the Bills. Josh Allen. I know you're high on Josh Allen this year.
Yeah, Josh Allen. I like what he's done for the Bills in the past, and I think he'll definitely with the new additions to the teams. Very few, but I think with the new additions, he'll definitely pair up well.
He is my quarterback one this year. Pretty much consensus quarterback one across the board. I haven't seen much or anything saying otherwise. The only thing that scares me with drafting him is the early draft price tag. He's being drafted in the second round, which I personally like to sit and wait on my quarterbacks. Excuse me, but I know a lot of people like to go for quarterback early. I'm assuming that's probably your strategy, picking up that quarterback early.
As an amateur fantasy football player, I always go for quarterbacks first.
Yeah, so when you're sitting there, if you're sitting there at the back of the second round, beginning of the third round, and you want to secure that quarterback position, Josh Allen is a guy that can give you the leg up over your competition every single week going in. Because when you're sitting there and you have Josh Allen at quarterback, that's one spot where you're like, you know what, set it and leave it. Don't have to worry about it for the rest of the year. So it's really a preference thing. I personally like to sit. A couple people like to go early on quarterbacks. It's all up to what you think the position depth is and that kind of thing. Looking at running backs, Devin Singletary is returning, and they drafted James Cook. If that name sounds familiar, he's the brother of Dalvin Cook, the running back down in Minnesota. Rookie from Georgia. I have high expectations for him in the pass game. Josh Allen, they're going to throw the ball a ton with Josh Allen. And really both running backs I'm a little bit high on the consensus. The only reason that I am a little bit hesitant on them is because of the fact that they're going to split the backfield. Neither of them will come out here with a bell cow situation. And so with the split backfield, it's going to be who's going to get the touchdown as to who performs well that week. And that just always scares me a little bit. I don't know how you feel about this. I'm going to look over at their draft position of Devin Singletary here, but if you want to say a few words on the running backs.
Yeah, as far as James Cook goes, I think everybody has a pretty sane and reasonable opinion on James Cook. I think there's not much you can really opinionate about him just based off numbers and stuff. I mean, second round pick. I think everybody has a good view on them.
Yeah, the draft capital is there definitely for him to get the backfield. Devin Singletary is being drafted around guys like James Robinson and Michael Carter, who we just talked about for the Jets. So that's the thing. When you're sitting there and you're looking if you want Devin Singletary or Michael Carter, I think I would probably go Devin Singletary, just because Michael Carter is a clear second back. He's the B running back. He's the number 2 running back. Whereas with the Bills, it's a 1A, 1B situation. So I feel like if you're looking at a second running back on a team or a split carries thing, you want to go with split carries. Another interesting thing to point out here, players getting drafted on Devin Singletary different positions are like Elijah Moore, Robert Woods, Gabriel Davis, who we'll talk about here in just a second. And these are the kind of guys that I like to grab, like these wide receivers. So personally, when I'm in the 7th round here, I'm not really looking to capitalize on the running back position as much right in here as I am a wide receiver at the back of the 7th. Start of the 8th, you can start looking back to the running back pool again, but in that 6th, 7th round, I'm looking at receivers, so I like to try and load up on running backs early. But if you did take a quarterback early and you need that RB2, Devin Singletary and James Cook are guys that are going to be right there waiting for you. Speaking of Gabriel Davis, we're going to go to the wide receivers here. Stephon Diggs, I mean, he's been great since he moved to Buffalo. He had a good, solid career in Minnesota, got traded to Buffalo, and he has absolutely exploded. I have him as my wide receiver 3 this year with wide receiver 1 upside. He could finish as the #1 wide receiver in fantasy, especially in the PPR format where he's going to get the ball in his hands a lot. And I just see him absolutely going to work this year. Gabriel Davis is there. A lot of people's breakout candidate this year. I know a lot of people are high on Gabriel Davis, and I think he'll do fine. The only thing you got to keep an eye on is his price tag inflates, because all these fantasy shows are going to be talking about how good Gabe Davis is, in part because of a big breakout performance in the playoffs against the Chiefs. But everyone's going to be talking about him, and that's going to inflate his draft price. So you just got to keep your expectations tempered.
Yeah, last year he had a ankle injury, which some people were a little concerned about, but for an ankle injury, it wasn't severe enough to be relevant, I don't think.
At wide receiver, you can definitely come back from the ankle injury. So yeah, Gabriel Davis is definitely worth it. If he stays at his current draft price of 8th round, absolutely worth the pickup. But if he starts creeping down to that 6th round, you're going to have to be careful to tamper your expectations, just because that'll be about his ceiling. I think as like a top 24 wide receiver is his ceiling. And so currently being drafted as the wide receiver 35, that's a great price tag. But if he falls down to that mid-20 range, you got to kind of put the brakes on him. Other receivers there, Jamison Crowder, not really a fan. I mean, there's too many mouths to feed in this offense. And the same thing with Isaiah McKenzie. They'll both end up with a touchdown game somewhere, and they'll just annoy you. But neither of them are going to be consistent week-to-week fantasy performers. Tight end, Dawson Knox. This is a guy that I'm, let me just say this. Sometimes when you look at a player just on the outside, you'll be a little bit more high on them than if you actually look at the numbers. And going in, I've been high on Dawson Knox, but after looking at his numbers, it just scares me, the amount of work he would have to receive in order to become fantasy relevant. So I have him as my tight end 14 when he's being drafted as a tight end 8. So I'm actually trying to now steer clear of Dawson Knox just because of the ceiling on his, there's like a cap to his upside.
Yeah, although even for his relatively young career, he's at 1,200 yards right
now.
Oh,
no, yeah. He's played well with Josh Allen. It's just, I think having Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis, they're kind of cap how high he can explode. Which just has me a little tentative. And then they signed O.J. Howard this offseason. O.J. Howard played well with Jameis Winston in Tampa. Kind of fell out of favor when Gronk came, and he just has proven he can't be a tight end too. So I'm not spending draft capital on O.J. Howard. If we go down to New England, I keep saying down like we're going down somewhere, but if we go up to New England, it's really interesting. The Patriots, if you remember last offseason, they went out and spent a bunch of money on weapons, trying to beef up a core that Mac Jones could throw the ball to, and it didn't really work out. But now it's year 2 of the system. Everybody's been here for a year, and they're kind of getting their second year under their belt, and I don't think it matters.
Okay, well, I have a little bit more severe opinion on that.
Okay,
kind of, I guess maybe possibly more dramatic. So the Patriots are readjusting to some tough losses in the past few years, not necessarily the last
close games too, where they could have pulled it out.
I agree. So some tough losses as far as players go, but I really don't think they'll do too well. I think maybe next season will be good for them, because I think that's appropriate time to recover from those losses.
And as much as I love Mac Jones, their quarterback down there from Alabama, it's just the fantasy value of him when he's not a mobile quarterback at all. No, that's where you get your big fantasy point of quarterback. Right. That's what makes Josh Allen the quarterback 1. Is the fact that he could throw for over 4,000 yards, but also rush for 500 and give you those points on the ground. Mac Jones doesn't give that kind of upside. If you look at him, he looks like Tom Brady 2.0. He's not. He'll throw the ball from the pocket all day, but he's not going to do much once he gets outside the pocket, and that just really limits his fantasy capabilities. So I have him as the QB 23, just a bit lower than consensus. But I'm not really aiming for him in drafts. If I'm sitting there at the end of the draft and I want a second quarterback, he's a guy that could maybe throw for a bunch of yards, but it's not likely. So it's really like a risk-reward pick there. In the running back room, they have Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. Last season, they split carries, and Damian Harris ended up having a monster fantasy season, but it was mostly because of his touchdowns. He got more lucky touchdowns than I've ever seen. They put the ball at the 1-yard line and just gave him the rock, which is what they do with the running backs, but the odds of that happening again are very low. I'm a little bit lower than consensus on him. I actually have Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris ranked back-to-back at 33 and 34 with Harris being in front. But when he's being drafted as the RB45, that just kind of terrifies me personally. I think that's his ceiling. Once again, I mean, sure, his ceiling is probably an RB1 if he